Behind every harmless joke lies the potential for catastrophic consequences that no one sees coming. In this video, we're uncovering 6 of the worst deaths caused by pranks ever recorded, and every single one ended the same devastating way. It was May 21st, 2015 in the Philippines. The morning air in Camarines Norte, Bicol, was humid but calm, and the corridors of a local public high school carried the usual clatter of students moving between classes. Yet beneath the normal bustle, the stage was unknowingly set for a sudden fatal accident. Angelo Yasis, 16, was a high-achieving senior known for his studious approach to schoolwork and disciplined routines. He lived with his mother, who worked long hours as a seamstress, and he contributed financially through creating art projects for grade schoolers part-time. On the day of the incident, he was carrying 3 thick textbooks stacked in one arm while descending the stairwell. The concrete stairs in the main stairwell were worn and uneven in places, with a slight slope that made carrying a heavy load more physically demanding, especially if the surface was compromised. That morning, a group of classmates had poured a thin layer of soapy water over a loose tile at the top of the 3rd flight as a prank. Cell phone footage of one of the pranksters later revealed several students laughing quietly as they navigated around the slick spot. No staff members were present in the stairwell, and the tile's instability was unnoticed by faculty. Angelo, unaware of the hazard, approached the top of the flight while reviewing his schedule mentally. As he stepped onto the soaped tile, the sole of his shoe lost traction completely. The loose tile shifted slightly under his weight, further reducing grip, and he began sliding backward uncontrollably. The concrete stairwell, narrow with low railings, offered no opportunity to arrest his fall. He tumbled, rotating backward, striking his head against the edge of one step, then his upper back and shoulders on successive steps. Fellow students nearby froze initially, then ran toward him, but they were too late to prevent multiple impacts. The final motion sent him landing at the bottom of the stairwell. His body lay in a partially curled, awkward position, consistent with instinctive flexion during a fall. One student immediately ran to the office and called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, performing CPR and stabilizing him for transport. Hospital staff confirmed severe, unsurvivable trauma before arrival, documenting multiple fractures and internal bleeding consistent with blunt force impacts over multiple surfaces. They declared him dead on transport. The coroner's report, summarized in accessible terms, listed catastrophic head injuries, dislocation of the cervical spine, and extensive internal bleeding in the brain and chest. The official cause of death was determined to be massive trauma resulting from a fall down concrete stairs. In the aftermath, the pranksters were disciplined by the school and required to perform community service. Angelo's mother held a small, solemn funeral, attended by family, friends, and classmates, mourning the loss of her only son. It was July 9th, 2017 in Freiburg, Germany. The local cycling community was preparing for a small neighborhood race, but underneath the calm, an accident in motion had already been introduced. Lucas Meyer, 21, was a dedicated cyclist and a member of a cycling club. He spent most of his free time training on local roads, often starting before dawn to fit sessions around his part-time job at a bike shop. Lucas was saving money to upgrade to a custom racing bike. He wore standard protective gear, padded shorts, gloves, and a certified competitive cycling helmet meeting European safety standards. But he relied on proper bike maintenance and attention to road conditions to stay safe. His bike, a mid-range aluminum frame weighing roughly 18 pounds, was in excellent condition under normal circumstances. The course that day included a steep downhill stretch with a particularly tight right-hand turn flanked by an old lamppost, concrete curbs, and uneven cobblestones. Even with full braking capacity, cyclists needed precise control to navigate it safely at race speeds. Earlier that morning, Lucas's older cousin, joking in poor judgment, had loosened the brake cables on Lucas's bike. The cousin later admitted he meant it as a harmless scare, intending to embarrass Lucas for boasting the night before about taking the downhill turn without heavy braking and assuming Lucas would notice the slack during his warm-up. The tampering was subtle, only a slight slack, undetectable without detailed inspection. Under light brake pressure, the levers felt normal, but the brakes would fail under the high force application required for sharp downhill cornering. But Lucas didn't notice the adjustment. He mounted his bike with the usual pre-race routine, performing standard brake tests that felt normal under light pressure, unaware that their effectiveness would fail under the higher forces of the descent. As the race began, Lucas approached the downhill stretch in the lead pack, pushing speed but maintaining control. As he neared the sharp right-hand corner, he applied his brakes fully, expecting the usual deceleration. The brake levers pulled without sufficient resistance, and the bike failed to slow adequately under maximum applied force. Lucas instinctively shifted weight backward and attempted to swerve, but the turn's narrowness and the cobblestone surface left no margin for error. Witnesses saw the bike slide uncontrollably across the corner. Lucas was thrown forward over the handlebars in a near-perfect projection, striking the lamppost head first. The lamppost was positioned just inches beyond the optimal racing line, leaving almost no clearance. The impact cracked his helmet, but it did not absorb enough force to prevent fatal trauma. His body collided with the concrete base and partially onto the curb before sliding into the street. Fellow racers rushed to the scene immediately, and one bystander called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, performing advanced life support, but Lucas was pronounced dead at the scene. The post-mortem report listed severe brain contusions, skull fractures, and multiple facial bone fractures. The cause of death was determined to be instantaneous brain trauma and severe head injury from high-speed impact. Afterwards, Lucas's family pursued legal action against the cousin. The court determined gross negligence and reckless endangerment. The cousin received a suspended sentence and was required to complete community service and pay restitution to the Meyer family. It was September 14th, 2016. The morning sun filtered weakly through the monsoon haze over a primary school in Pune, India. Recess was in full swing, but beneath the ordinary noise, a small, unnoticed setup had been placed that would turn a simple playtime into a tragedy. Rohan Iyer, 10, was a shy, introverted boy who found comfort in drawing and sketching during breaks rather than joining the more boisterous games. He lived with his mother and grandmother. Rohan had a gentle temperament, avoided confrontation, and often endured teasing from classmates without complaint. Teachers noted his intelligence and patience, though they also observed he struggled to assert himself socially. The playground in their school had concrete pathways, metal swing sets, low railings around the sandpit, and a small raised curb approximately 6 inches high. While generally safe, its hard surfaces and rigid equipment meant falls or collisions could result in serious injury. Rohan's daily recess routines involved sketching near the swings while observing others play, maintaining distance from rougher activities. That morning, a small group of classmates placed a realistic rubber snake near the swings in an attempt to scare Rohan. The snake's design was detailed, with painted scales, a flexible body, and coiled posture. Rohan approached the swings, focused on his sketch pad, when his gaze caught the snake. The sudden visual triggered an immediate, involuntary startle response. He jumped backward with full force, attempting to distance himself from the perceived danger. His foot landed on the slightly wet concrete and slid backward, carrying him off the raised 6-inch curb and toward a metal swing post. His neck struck the post at an awkward angle, impacting the back and side of his cervical spine. The playground attendant and nearby students observed the collision in real time. Rohan collapsed immediately, motionless with his drawing materials scattered around him. Fellow students screamed and ran to alert the attendant, who called emergency services. Responders arrived 8 minutes later, performing emergency stabilization. But Rohan never regained consciousness. The physical evidence at the scene, the position of his body, impact marks on the swing post, and the scattered backpack corroborated the eyewitness accounts. The coroner's report recorded fractured cervical vertebrae, spinal cord transection, and compressive and rotational trauma to the neck, consistent with a fall from a slightly elevated surface. The cause of death was determined to be a broken neck causing immediate paralysis and fatal spinal injury. After the incident, Rohan's parents pursued action against the children involved, and school administrators faced scrutiny over playground supervision. Community response centered on outrage over bullying and the casual cruelty that led to the fatal incident. It was October 28, 2015. The late afternoon in suburban Arlington, Virginia. Children darted along sidewalks in costumes, and the faint scent of wood smoke lingered from backyard fire pits. However, the calm of the neighborhood masked an invisible hazard, a small, crude setup on the road meant as a prank. David Conde, 32, was a school bus driver known for his punctuality and meticulous attention to safety. He lived with his wife, Sarah, 29, a nurse at a nearby hospital. The couple was expecting their first child and were cautious in daily life, often double-checking locks, car seats, and schedules to ensure safety. David's work required constant vigilance, navigating city streets and managing distracted children. Sarah's nursing shifts were demanding, yet she maintained strict routines for health and exercise, often jogging before work to manage stress. Both were considered careful, responsible, and highly conscientious by friends and colleagues. Their personal life was equally structured. David maintained his vehicle meticulously, checking brakes, lights, and tires daily due to the nature of his job. Sarah preferred walking or cycling in well-lit areas, aware of neighborhood risks. On the evening of the incident, they were driving home from a late prenatal appointment, returning in their 2012 mid-size sedan along a narrow 25-mile-per-hour residential street lined with parked cars. Visibility was average, though the low sun cast long shadows across the asphalt. Their attentiveness, however, could not account for external, unpredictable hazards. Earlier, a group of neighborhood teenagers had placed a scarecrow in the road dressed in a Halloween costume as a prank. The figure was upright and positioned in the lane, intended to startle passing drivers. Witnesses later reported seeing multiple vehicles swerve suddenly to avoid the scarecrow, creating unpredictable patterns of movement. The pranksters did not consider the consequences of drivers reacting at moderate speed on a street with oncoming traffic. David and Sarah approached the street at a moderate speed of approximately 30 miles per hour, unaware of the obstruction ahead. As they neared, a passing car swerved sharply to avoid the scarecrow, crossing into the opposite lane. The sedan could not react in time. The front of the oncoming vehicle struck the Conde's car at approximately a 40 miles per hour combined impact, driving the sedan violently off course and crushing the passenger compartment. The vehicle rotated slightly, about 30 degrees, before coming to rest against a tree. Neighbors rushed into the street, and a nearby street surveillance camera recorded the collision sequence. Inside the car, the force of the impact caused immediate structural deformation. Both David and Sarah suffered catastrophic blunt force trauma. Ribs were shattered, skulls fractured, and internal bleeding occurred in multiple organs, including the liver, spleen, and major blood vessels. Sarah's seatbelt was positioned normally, but still allowed blunt force to her lower abdomen, resulting in the stillbirth of their unborn child. Witnesses described the car's crumpling and the sound of metal twisting against metal. Emergency services arrived within 7 minutes, performing rapid assessment, but both adults were pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's report listed multi-system blunt force trauma as the cause of death, specifying fractures to the skull, ribs, and cervical vertebrae, along with internal hemorrhage in thoracic and abdominal organs. The fetus was stillborn due to direct blunt abdominal trauma sustained by Sarah, confirmed to be a result of the collision forces. Investigators determined that the collision resulted directly from the other vehicle swerving to avoid the scarecrow, which had been illegally and negligently placed on the roadway. After the incident, local authorities identified the pranksters through surveillance footage and eyewitness statements. They were charged with reckless endangerment and faced fines and community service. No jail time was served due to age and lack of prior offenses. The Conde's funeral was private, attended by family and close friends. It was August 12, 2016. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the arid terrain near Broken Hill, New South Wales. An old, disused silver mine sat at the edge of the property, its entrance partially collapsed and shored up by rusting beams. To a casual observer, the area seemed quiet, but within the tunnels and rubble, a single misstep was about to turn curiosity into catastrophe. Emily Lohr, 21, was a geology student at a major Australian university, specializing in mineralogy and structural geology. She spent weekends visiting historical mines and quarries, photographing stratigraphic layers and abandoned industrial equipment for both study and personal interest. Emily was methodical and careful, with a deep understanding of rock stability, structural decay, and the hazards of derelict mining sites. Friends described her as meticulous, curious, and adventurous, but always conscious of personal safety and environmental risks. She often carried a field pack containing a full hard hat helmet with chin strap, headlamp with backup batteries, gloves, first aid supplies, and sturdy lace-up boots designed for uneven terrain, and she wore long pants and sleeves to minimize scrapes and cuts. Beyond academics, Emily documented her explorations for a small university club and occasionally collaborated with local heritage societies to record and map abandoned mines. She had received small grants for equipment, including high-lumen headlamps and portable gas detectors, and was aware of the dangers posed by unstable floors, loose rock, and hidden vertical shafts. Her preparation and gear typically mitigated risks, but the environment remained inherently hazardous. Narrow tunnels, unpredictable rubble, rust flakes, and corroded metal beams made even minor missteps potentially fatal. On the day of the incident, Emily joined 3 friends near the mine for a short exploration. However, they decided to play a prank by pretending to leave her alone in the main tunnel while extinguishing their headlamps, recording audio for later humor, and not providing a rope or handhold along the tunnel edge. The group ignored several warning signs, posted danger, unstable mine notices, crumbling supports, loose stones scattered along the floor, and uneven flooring. No formal risk assessment or rope line was established, and cell service was non-existent in the area, reducing options for emergency communication. The prank elevated danger far beyond normal exploration conditions. Emily entered the darkened tunnel, relying solely on the dim, ambient light from outside. Her foot caught an uneven stone, and she stumbled forward, arms flailing to regain balance. The absence of lighting eliminated any visual cues about holes or debris in her path. She slipped on loose gravel, and her momentum carried her toward a concealed vertical shaft, hidden beneath a partially collapsed floor section. The shaft was approximately 10 feet deep, with rusted rebar protruding irregularly from the walls, remnants of an old support structure. Her body orientation during the fall caused her chest and upper torso to land on one set of protruding bars, while her lower torso and hips struck other rebar as she tumbled, producing multiple simultaneous injuries. Her friends immediately realized the prank had gone too far. They heard a sudden, sharp thud followed by Emily's scream. Their recorded laughter ceased, replaced by urgent shouts. One friend leaned over the edge but could not safely reach her. Another ran to the entrance to call emergency services. The rescuers brought a collapsible ladder and secured ropes before reaching her to prevent further collapse or injury. Within 12 minutes, local search and rescue teams arrived, navigating unstable floors and low visibility to reach her. By the time they accessed the shaft, Emily had succumbed to severe trauma and was pronounced dead at the scene. The post-mortem report showed puncture wounds from rebar to the chest and abdomen, multiple rib and pelvic fractures, punctured lungs, and extensive internal hemorrhage across thoracic and abdominal cavities. The primary cause of death was impalement on rusted rebar, with catastrophic internal injuries occurring instantly, making survival impossible. Following the incident, the university's geology department implemented stricter safety protocols for field trips, including mandatory risk assessments, buddy systems with constant visual contact, formal approval for entry into abandoned structures, and the requirement of safety ropes or secured harnesses when exploring unknown tunnels. Emily's friends faced legal consequences for gross negligence, resulting in fines, probation, and mandatory community service related to safety education. It was March 18, 2017, late afternoon in Rio de Janeiro's complex urban sprawl. On the fourth floor of a worn apartment building, a small lapse in judgment intersected with unforgiving height and concrete. Matheus Ribeiro, 24, was a small-time content creator known for documenting social issues in his community. He had a modest following on social media and was committed to shedding light on the daily struggles in his neighborhood, from inadequate sanitation to local crime patterns. Matheus balanced his creative work with a part-time job at a local internet cafe, and he was careful to maintain a low profile while navigating the challenges of life in a densely populated urban environment. Friends described him as politically aware, intelligent, and deliberate, but prone to anxiety in high-pressure situations. Matheus's environment was inherently hazardous. His apartment complex had narrow balconies with low railings approximately 36 inches high, stairwells without adequate lighting, and uneven flooring prone to crumbling in places. The wrought iron fencing below the balconies was designed to deter trespassers, but it also created a lethal hazard in case of a fall. Matheus had navigated these spaces safely many times before, relying on caution, but the precarious layout and high-density neighborhood meant even minor miscalculations could have severe consequences. That evening, several acquaintances forced entry into Matheus's apartment as part of a planned prank they called the Influencer's Ambush. After pushing in the door, they began igniting small firecrackers inside the entryway and living area, producing sharp explosions, smoke, and flashes of light in the confined space as if a gang raid was occurring. The prank was intended to capture his startled reaction for online sharing, but no one considered the risks of panic in a small apartment with direct access to a balcony. Startled by the sudden blasts at close range and the intrusion into his home, Matheus reacted reflexively. Disoriented and attempting to escape what he perceived as immediate danger, he moved backward toward the balcony. In the chaos, he misjudged the distance to the railing and stepped into open space. He fell forward over the low balcony barrier, arms extended instinctively, and dropped approximately 40 feet to the street below. Witnesses later described hearing the firecrackers followed by a single, heavy impact. He landed directly on the wrought iron fence below, the spikes piercing his torso. The spikes entered laterally at the chest, just beside the sternum, and through the abdomen below the right rib cage, puncturing the lungs and major blood vessels. Blood pooled immediately around the points of contact. Neighbors ran toward the scene, some screaming, some attempting to stabilize his body. But the severity of the injuries was evident. One neighbor called emergency services, who arrived within 12 minutes, navigating the narrow alley. Paramedics assessed the injuries and confirmed that Matheus had already succumbed to the trauma. The coroner's report listed penetrating trauma to the chest and abdomen, ruptured lungs, and major blood vessel damage. The cause of death was immediate massive internal injury from impalement on the metal fence. After the incident, Matheus's family removed his online content to protect his privacy and mitigate further distress. Authorities pursued legal action against the friends responsible for the prank, resulting in manslaughter charges for gross negligence due to reckless endangerment. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here.